how to sew a quilt on your domestic sewing machine. So you don't have to get that sent out necessarily to a long armor or wait all that time for a long armor to go ahead and get that back to you, because they might have a waiting list that's maybe a month or two long. So you never know when you want to pull in the skill set of how to quilt your quilt on your domestic sewing machine. So I've got an easy guide for you and some solutions for you that I use that I've implemented throughout all the years. I have only sent one quilt to a long armor in my entire life, and that was because I had a very urgent deal, and I did that. So anyway, so that's all I've done is long, and I do now own my own long arm. I started owning one in 2009. So now I can long arm my own quilts. I don't long arm for people, but before 2009, and I've been quilting for a long time, I want to show you how I quilt on my domestic sewing machine, and I'll give you guys some other tips and tricks, but this is definitely a really good introductory. So tell me where you guys are from. Hi, Amanda. Are you having a chilly day? I am back in the studio today. I did some actual tech stuff for the cameras. You can see I've got two screens on the camera today because I want you guys to be able to see close up to what the sewing machine looks like. And anyway, so let's go ahead and get started. So one of the very first things that I do is I start by putting a new needle in my sewing machine. So absolutely need to put a new needle, sorry, in your sewing machine. Hello, Sally. Hi, Amanda. Now, what are some of the biggest pain points for you of quilting a quilt on your domestic sewing machine? And let's talk about it and see if we can come up with some different solutions. So fresh new needle, and I also use a denim quilting needle, and one that's sharp and nice. Hello, Delinda. It's so good for you. Good to see you. So get a new needle in your quilting machine or your domestic sewing machine and get that set up and ready to go. Now, you need to take off your sewing machine foot. So typically I have on my 1/4 inch foot, and you can see I've got, but with this, we are going to put on our walking foot, and you really do need a walking foot. So when I was beginning quilting, I did not have a walking foot, or actually I might have had a walking foot, but I didn't know what a walking foot was. So sometimes sewing machines come with them, and if not, they're an extra accessory. You can easily find one on, say, Amazon, on a website, in a store where you buy your local sewing machine. So let's go ahead, and here is what my walking foot looks like. So I'm going to attach this to my sewing machine. So you can see on the upper little window up above, it's important that you catch the screw where your needle goes, and that's, you're going to catch this little bit right here. Hello, Linda. So she finished her quilt top, and now she needs quilts to quilt it. Good. So Linda has her quilt top all layered and pinned, and we've been talking about how to layer your quilt top. So I'm going to put my walking foot now on my sewing machine. So I'm going to screw it on there. Oops, my little screw's kind of going a little wonky. So let's go ahead and get that screwed on there. And you want to have it tight, not too much tight. Okay, Amanda, she says she only has a 6-inch throat space. Let me measure mine, because I had to pull out my old sewing machine. So this is a 6-inch throat space too. So you can see I've got my smaller sewing machine. My other one, I cannot sew fast or with a lot of effort. So that's something that's happened to me. So I actually had to switch out my different sewing machines. And so I am actually using a smaller machine. So I'm going to show you what that is like today. So I'm so glad that I have this switched out. I need to service my sewing machine since the pandemic with all the sewing that we did last year, right? As we were home. Okay, so the quilt top that we're working on is the Live Well, Live Strong quilt top, and you can see this right here. We actually layered this, and we did two videos on this, on how to layer your quilt. So I've got my quilt completely layered. We used a little bit of spray adhesive. We used a piece of plywood. We used my binding clips right here. So we used these things when we were spraying our quilt outside, and we just used a small amount of spray adhesive, and then I safety pinned it. So I've got my safety pin container right here, because as we quilt, we're going to go ahead and take out those safety pins. I do a tiny bit of spray adhesive, and I do the safety pins because I don't want my quilt top to be too heavy from safety pins, okay? So, yes, using that throat space is a little difficult, and I'm glad that you were able to quilt your quilts. So, now, the technique that we're going to use for quilting, I'm going to show you the technique that we're going to use on a sample right here. So, we are going to use the wide matchstick quilting, so it's kind of like a modern matchstick quilting, and on this we are going to do lines, and they don't have to be straight across. They can vary in width, okay? Oh, thank you, Amanda. So they're going to vary in width going across, but we're going to go straight across our whole top of our quilt, and then we're going to roll it and keep feeding it through, and we're going to do that again. But occasionally we're going to throw in a wiggle line there, okay? So not everything has to be perfect or match up. So this is definitely a quilting technique that you can do that is very easy to implement on your domestic sewing machine. So we're going to go ahead and do it this technique. So we're going to do straight lines across. We're not going to worry if they're a perfect match or not. And then we're going to occasionally throw in a wiggle in there and overlap some of the lines with the wiggle, okay? So that's how we're going to quilt this one today. And you can see the sample I have right here. This coral ombre was quilted that way, and so is this quilt right here. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to find the top of the Live Well, Live Strong quilt. So the top of the quilt is not there. It is right, let me see. This is the top of the quilt. Now, when I was quilting mine, I went ahead and I left some extra fabric right up there from quilting it on my piece of plywood. So this is the point where we are going to want to just go ahead and roll and get that excess fabric off. And we're going to just have to use a pair of scissors because I'm not sure where I set my, so let me go ahead and pull this. We're going to just quickly trim off the quilt. And I want you guys to see, let's go ahead and switch the camera so you have the above view. So I want you guys to see, I'm not going to let that much excess be there because we don't want too much at the top of our quilt. So I'm going to leave about an inch space right across there. So let's go ahead. And you want to remove as much extra bulk that you need as you're going through your domestic sewing machine. So a larger throat would be nice on your sewing machine, but you don't have to have it. I've done plenty of quilts without having that larger throat space, and I will teach you guys some tips on how to do that. Now, probably next week, depending on how fast we do this video right here, we are going to go ahead and, okay, so let's go ahead and cut this all the way through. We've got that side down. Now I'm going to go ahead and do this other side right here. So now what we are going to do is I'm going to teach you guys how to hand baste your quilt with the 20-inch by 20-inch quilt. And I'm going to teach you guys how to hand baste that with a needle and thread. So we're going to just trim this off. You want about an inch or a half inch, something like that, around the circumference of your quilt because the fabric will shift. If you're preparing your quilt for a long arm quilter, oh, Judy, she says, I use the Hara tool to mark. Oh my gosh, I love that idea. Very good. So if you have a specific pattern that you are working on, thank you for sharing that tip. She says she uses the Hara tool to go ahead and be able to work on that. I'm going to make sure my little chat, I can see the box a little bit better of everybody's comments. Okay, oops, that one went a little bit further up. So I went ahead and I fixed a couple things, dang it, on my computer so that I can see more of this. Oh, it is so good. Thank you. You said you love my happiness. Thank you so much. You are so kind. Okay, so everything is trimmed up. So Be sure to take off any excess fabric that you've got because you're doing this on a domestic machine. About 1 inch is appropriate. I'm going to go ahead and move my sewing scissors right over here. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to increase our stitch length. So we're going to increase our stitch length on our sewing machine. You don't want to quilt, so move up close to the other corner. Okay, all right, very good. Thank you, Christy, for letting me know that. I just so appreciate it. So let's go ahead and bring this over, and I can bring this closer over here. So let me go ahead and move this over. Okay. In the top corner, it's covered by the live label, the live label. Let me see here. Covered by the live label. Okay, I will look and see what that says. Oh, I see what you're saying. It's covered by the live label. Okay, I will move that in just a minute. Now, let's go ahead and let's take out a few little corners. So should I move it over to the right-hand side? That's some really good input. Now, we're going to increase our stitch length here. So you want to go to your sewing machine and take your sewing machine and make your stitch length a larger stitch length. So do not forget to do that. So maybe a 4 or a 5 would be great, okay? When I stitch on my long arm sewing machine, I'm actually using, like a 10. So let's go ahead and look at our stitch length. You also want to make sure you've got bobbins handy and you've got your top thread handy. And I didn't quite talk about, let me make sure. Oh, sorry, my little foot pedal, switching all these machines. I have changed up so many things today. So let's go ahead and get going. And I'm going to take out a couple safety pins here as I travel. And this side of the quilt where I have so much excess, I'm actually going to turn this around. So, move up close to the other corner. Okay, I will. All right, here we go. So let me go ahead. I'm rolling this up my other side of my quilt. And we're going to use this method to help us move the quilt through easier. You can also wear gloves when you are doing this. So I've got this kind of organized right here and this organized over here on this stitch, on this length. Okay, I'm going to make that just a little bit smaller of my stitch length. Let's go ahead and pull this across. I'm going to put my needle in the needle down position. So if you have that feature on your sewing machine, you want to use that that feature. And I'm going to take out a few more of my pins as I go along here. And we are going to just do straight line quilting. It doesn't matter if your lines are perfectly straight. You just want to go ahead and get that going. So just get it in there and start stitching and start stabilizing it, and it will feel better as you go along. So just start. One of the best places to start quilting would be a wall hanging, be a baby quilt. So anything like that would be a great place to start quilting on your domestic sewing machine. And you can even practice. You might want to practice with 2 pieces of, say, muslin fabric or fabric that you're just not super crazy about. And I'm using my hand, since I only have one side right here, I'm letting the feed dog of my the quilting foot to feed through the quilt. Okay, we've got several layers, but we do want to let our sewing machine work. We don't want to be pushing it through too fast because we do want an even stitch length, okay? So let's go ahead and pull this through this last little bit. All right, so that's my first section, my first little swipe. And we're going to just go ahead and do another swipe down here, and you'll see how this looks. I'm going to do about 3 of these, and then I'm going to do the curvy one for you. So give me just one moment, and let's go ahead and see here. And I can move that the camera. Let's see if I can move that circle so it's maybe over on the other side. Let's move that over here. That's a good spot for it, right on top of that sewing machine. Okay, hold on. I want to be able to see. So Linda, she has machine quilted lots of small projects and baby quilts, but never a larger project. So let's go ahead and bring this back down. And I think we've got a good view on that sewing machine. Okay, good. I'm so glad. So I'm taking out just a few more pins that might be close in my path. And I'm going to go ahead and just take those out. Where do you guys store your safety pins? I've always used this ball jar. This ball jar has been in my sewing room, I don't know. I don't even know how long. Probably the last 18 years or something. I have no idea. Now, we're not going to go too tight or heavy on this, okay? So maybe give yourself about an inch, but you want to change the amount of width that you're actually doing. So we're going to go ahead and do this about an inch away from the other. Oops. Oh, my sewing needle came out. Probably need to tighten that. Let me go ahead and bring this up. So glad it came out, but it did not break. Let's put down that foot. So my sewing needle, and that can happen as you are quilting. Let me grab a screwdriver from in here, and I actually might use my seam ripper to make sure that this is tightened the way it needs to be. So let me go ahead and pull this back. Gosh, I think my other sewing machine has the better screwdrivers. So yes, I remember I just changed out my sewing machine needle, and it is just slightly loose. So let's go ahead. I think that's tightened up good enough now. Let's go ahead and cover up my back there. There we go. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this again. Okay, so I'm about an inch, but if you vary in width, remember we're trying not to have everything, and let me bring this closer to me so you can see that coming out. Oop, the back side. Oh, that sewing machine, the needle came out again. Hold on for 1 minute. I'm gonna go grab that needle, my screwdriver, off my other machine. There we go. Oops. Okay, I bonked that a little bit too much. There we go. Oh, you guys, I'm so sorry. Okay, let's go ahead and lift that up. When you switch out your sewing machines and have a different space, it's kind of crazy. At least for me, because not everything is where I normally expect it. Okay, so I grabbed my screwdriver. I am tightening that good, so my sewing machine needle will stay intact. And let's pop that back on. I'm going to bring this up so I'm back where that needle was, and let's push this through. So yeah, maybe I should be putting this sewing machine on a little bit. There we go. So let's go ahead and go right there. And let's make sure you can still see this camera right here. So you can see how I'm feeding this through. And once again, my line is not a perfect straight line, but that's okay, because that's the look of the Matchstick quilting, where it's not exactly perfect. So let's go ahead and just bring this of the kind of quilting. So it takes your nerves out of the quilting process, where you are not so nervous and you feel like you have to have everything perfect. So what you want to do is kind of try to relax while you're sitting here, and don't be so nervous about everything. And remember that after you wash this, everything that you see will look so differently when all the fabrics and the batting shrinks up. Okay, we're gonna bring this in, and it's kind of going nice at a nice pace for me right now. Feeling good about this pace. So let's go ahead and just bring this through so that we can see this coming. And it doesn't have to be perfect. So you can see my lengths and my widths are changing with time. It does not have to be perfect. And especially as you start rolling this up to the interior inside this area right here, your throat space, then it will look a lot different. So remember, you have some extra room right here right now, but we won't in just a minute. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that down. Now, since I'm doing this type of quilting, I'm not starting from the center. So since this type of quilting, I do not need to start from the center, and with the way that I layered and quilted my quilt, I do not need to start at the center of the quilt. All right, so we're going to go ahead and just put another line in here. I've got another pin to pop out, And I only used a small amount of spray basting. So with using a smaller amount of spray baste, it's not sticky on my needle. It's not going funky monkey. It's staying really good and consistent in there, okay? Because I don't have a gob of spray adhesive. I just sprayed a little bit, just enough so that I could go ahead and get the quilt basted adequately for the batting I'm using. So my batting that I'm using says that things should be quilted every 4 to 6 inches. So every batting has different ratings, and you'll want to read the instructions on your particular batting. I am using a Hobbs 80-20. So I recommend that when you're pushing it through your domestic sewing machine, that you push it through that you're using a smaller, a thinner bat. So you can see right here that this batting is just a basic 80-20 bat. And on this batting, you can see it's at a really thin loft. So I don't have to worry about a super thick loft. Okay, now what we're gonna do, and I'm gonna show you this. You can see some of those lines are not perfectly straight. Now we're going to just do a nice little curve along here. So I'll show you how I do that. All right, we're gonna start up here. I'm gonna bring it up, and I'm gonna just let it curve every so often. And I'm gonna pivot down, and I'm gonna curve it back up. And I'm allowing the sewing machine to pull it through with the bottom feed dogs and with the walking foot. So I'm just ever so slightly pivoting the quilt so that I've got a nice, soft, and gentle wave up at the top of the quilt. So nothing too drastic or crazy, and something that's manageable. You'll maybe want to do something that's maybe within a 3-inch area, and you just kind of gently have that go across. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at this. I'm going to switch the camera to the other view. Okay, good job. Okay, so let me just go ahead and show you guys this. So we have just quilted the top of this. Yes, Judy, a lot of people quilt from the center to the outside, and you can absolutely do that. But one of the things I do like to do is to just get started and make sure my top is nice and stable. But with this method, I have gone all the way down to the center and then flipped it around and come back. And you do want to kind of move around in different places because you don't want that to come around. Okay, let's look at the back of this. So you can see the back of the quilt. We've got a nice, we don't have anything that's poking, any kind of fabric that's folding on itself. We had this, the secret to this is getting a good layering so you don't have to be nervous about the actual quilting part of it. So what I can do now is I can actually shift this, and I've got less pins right here, which is really nice, but I can actually now move this so that you're actually, so Linda says she has 2 tables with the machine. And yes, I do have a limited amount of space to go ahead and bring this over. Does the glue gum up your needle? No, my needle is definitely not getting gummed up at all because I used a very, very small amount of spray adhesive. I did not use a significant amount of spray adhesive because I still pinned this. I used the spray adhesive just as a tool to go ahead and get it so that things were holding together, but I came back and I pinned my quilt, okay? So that's a great question, Linda. Really, really great question. Okay, so a Hera tool. So a Hera tool is kind of like a little, gotta see if I've got one just right back here, but a Hera tool is kind of like a little running, it's kind of like a rotary blade, but not a rotary blade, and it just kind of brings it along, your markings of where you want to quilt. So let's see here. Let's go ahead and see what other questions there are so I can answer any questions that are going on. Amanda says the camera placement is better. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I loved getting this technique on the mini quilt. To me, it gives movement to the blocks. I agree. So I think we've got a great placement of quilting here. Okay, any other questions that you guys have for this particular technique? I am actually going to quilt a little more, and I feel like I kind of bumbled up some of my video today, so I might come back on and do another live video. We will see. So, because I just didn't have everything I needed, like my screwdriver and other things like that. So I might come back and do another live video. We will see what I end up doing. Thank you for being so patient with me with all of the little tech issues and with the little, the switching out of the sewing machine. But at least you can see what this is like on a very standard domestic sewing machine. So go ahead and get your quilts layered and get them ready to be quilted. Put your stitch length at a wider stitch length. Mine is at a 4.5. So I have a 4.5 stitch length. Is it better to start from the middle or the edge? You can do whichever one. The middle is always recommended, but when you're really densely quilting a quilt, your fabric is going to shift and move. Does that make sense? So this quilt we are not doing very dense quilting at all. And I'm not going to have a problem with how I layered and prepared this quilt by using the piece of plywood and by doing a little bit of spray adhesive and using as many pins as I've used. So when you have your quilt prepared and layered properly, you really won't have a problem with starting from the middle or the edge, and you can do so many different things, and you really won't have a problem as you come along. So you can see here, I'm going to roll this so it's kind of like that, and I can go about the middle of this. And one of the things that I wanted to make sure, let me go ahead and make sure both the cameras are working. Let's switch to that overhead, is I can go ahead and start right here at the middle. So, yeah, this is so cute. You guys, I've had this. When did I get this sewing machine? Let me think about this. What year did I get this sewing machine? Gosh. Oh, the year 2000. I've had this sewing machine for 21 years. And boy, I have used this sewing machine so much. So I'm going to roll this up a little bit better as we come. So let's go ahead and look at how I'm rolling this and rolling this. Here we go. And let's go ahead and look at this. You guys, if anyone has tips on video tips, I'm trying to improve my videos. Which machine is this one? This one is let me take out a safety pin right there. This is but I really do kind of want to make sure that this is a straight line coming across. So I am wanting to, when we're not, with a Live Well, Live Strong quilt, let me show you what this looks like. We don't have it's a sampler quilt, and we don't have these exact straight lines coming across that you can follow. So you do want to kind of follow a guide, or kind of where you know those block placements are. So right here, I know this block is hitting right here. So I'm going to be maybe 2 inches above this seam allowance right here. You can see I'm about 2 inches above that seam allowance. So you're going to want to, and hopefully this is not something that you have to mark. It is just something that you are going to go ahead. Here we go. Let me make sure that this foot is on good. Okay. It is not wanting to quilt. So you're going to want to bring this all the way across. So, I don't know. Maybe that stop button's on. There we go. This cute little sewing machine. Oh my gosh, I wonder how many quilts I've made on this sewing machine. I'm trying to think of when I got my other one newer to this one. But boy, I always save my older sewing machines, because then invariably I have somebody come over that wants to quilt. Use that needle down position so that your needle stays down if you have that feature on your sewing machine. And then now I'm keeping an eye of where I am approximately from this seam allowance right here. So at this point in time, I'm about maybe 4 inches from that. Let's go ahead and just bring this over, because you don't want your lines going too wonky, okay? But they don't have to be perfectly straight either. So maybe that's what makes me want to start at the top. But But that's how you go ahead and you roll it. When you get too much here, since we're just doing straight lines, you really can just turn this completely around. So let's do that really fast. Linda, your first machine was a Viking and you had it for 35 years. That is so fun. So I'm going to flip this quilt around. So this side is not quilted. So we started over on this side right here. But I want to show you that you can easily flip this around. And I find this quilting pattern, I'm going to go ahead and stitch just a tiny bit. Take out a couple pins before I go. You'll find that this pattern looks good on just about every quilt. And it's definitely has more of a modern aesthetic to it, this type of quilting. Let's go ahead and roll this up and roll up this side so we can hold this and handle this good. And let's push that through. Okay, and I'm not pushing too much. I'm still allowing my sewing machine to feed the quilt through. So you want to have a consistent stitch length. So you don't want to have super wide stitches and then super short stitches. So you want to have a consistent stitch length. Idealistically, that's the ideal thing. So you guys practice this on just 2 plain pieces of fabric if you want to. And practice it in other ways. So once again, I'm just using this line as a guide and I'm pushing this through, and you can see how I'm holding that from either side. So I'm not taking too much weight and too much struggle of it through any part of my body, really. So I'm keeping this going, and I don't feel like everything has to be completely perfect. These lines can move around a little bit. They don't have to be perfectly accurate. And by holding these rolls up, I'm able to kind of grip this a little bit better and bring that through. So really, you can start your quilt as long as it is basted absolutely accurately. You can start your quilt wherever you want to, depending on the quilting technique that you're using. And you can see right here, like for example, this is not perfectly straight, but I'm not going for straight lines, and that takes the pressure off your domestic machine quilting. So go for consistently inconsistent. Okay, so let me go ahead and by doing it this way, you can actually have these nice lines, but then put that wavy line in through it, and you'll be able to see a good it'll be consistently inconsistent. So don't try to go for absolute perfect lines. You want to show a little bit of inconsistency. Okay, you guys, any other questions? I am going to go ahead and switch this back to the overhead camera, and let's roll this out so that you can see the actual quilting on this. And boy, when that is quilted, finished quilting all the way through and bound and washed, yes, it looks just so beautiful. So don't go for super perfect. It'll make you tense up. And so what's wonderful about this is it isn't a super perfect pattern. Okay, love you guys tons. I will be back on Friday at noon Mountain Standard Time. I am in Salt Lake City, Utah, and we'll go over some more quilting techniques. And we will see you guys a little bit later. So have a great day and enjoy yourself and enjoy quilting and enjoy the things and take it in. Enjoy that rhythm that you're feeling, the sound of the machine and everything else. We'll talk to you guys later.